hour, 5 minutes past 10 p.m. on VI Day. Victory in Iraq, 4903. For all of us in the Fox News family, thanks for trusting us for your news and information. Stay tuned to this Fox station for continuing updates on your local news and to Fox News Channel on cable for coverage 24 hours a day. It continues right now. I'm Shepard Smith, Fox News, New York. And for our viewers on cable, thanks for staying with us. This extraordinary day will not end now. Linda Vester's here for continuing Team Fox coverage. Linda, what can you say?
Shepard Smith, an incredible day. America has been April 9th, America has been waiting. Iraqis have been waiting for what the Pentagon calls the tipping point. The point when it's clear Saddam Hussein's regime is gone, and now tipping point is such an apt phrase. After living under Saddam's tyranny since 1979, there you see the end. You can almost feel the jubilation among the Iraqis who toppled his statue today after a war that has taken just 3 short weeks. So many Iraqis had seen a family member tortured or killed under this regime, but now they are cheering, dragging the dictator's head through the streets, at least symbolically. It is a moment like the fall of the Berlin Wall, when a nation of more than 20 million people can finally breathe free.
After one of the most amazing days in Iraq's history, this major city of some 5 million people, the scene of celebration, looting, and fierce resistance, at least in some areas. We've shown you the statue of Saddam Hussein coming down. Let's look at some of the other images of this moment. Jubilant Iraqis symbolically dragging the head of Saddam Hussein's statue through the streets of Baghdad. Celebrations in different parts of the city were mixed with looting.
This is all out, complete engagement here. We've got mortar fire, heavy machine guns. Fires are now burning on the campus. This is Baghdad University, and it is warfare on this campus at this moment.
And just a few miles away, open warfare at the campus of Baghdad University. CNN's Martin Savage is embedded with the Marines who came under heavy fire. We'll hear more from Marty in a short bit. And these images shown on El Arabiya television earlier today, they showed wounded people, many of them children, casualties of war. The White House is calling today's events in Baghdad an historic moment. American Marines took charge of the city center. Saddam Hussein's regime seemed to evaporate, and the Iraqi people vented, and they built up their joy and showed their frustrations. Here's a look.
Today, the regime is in disarray, and much of Iraq is free from years of oppression. Televisions across the world today are filled with images of jubilant Iraqis who know the regime is coming to an end.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. But we very like Mr. Bush. Good, no Saddam, no Saddam. Good, Bush. No, Saddam.
It's going great. A little bit of an anticlimax coming to Baghdad.
I got my wife back home, and I just tell her I love her and I miss her every day.
How's it being out here in the front line?
It's what I joined up for.
Well, there's a mixture of human emotions on display on the streets of Baghdad, and unfortunately some of the scenes have been ugly. We have witnessed looting. Some of the Iraqis are still armed. I saw one man shoot dead another as they fought over the spoils.
This is a long ways from over. There are still pockets of very serious resistance. Our troops continue to come under fire.
There was a sound of explosions, heavy gunfire, heavy machine gun fire. We're now moving, obviously, in a different direction. It appears that the gunfire is coming from a collection of buildings that are off to our left. We can't see it. We can only hear it and watch the Marines as they react to it. To be honest, this was not the exact reception we anticipated. Coming in.
On the campus of Baghdad University, as the Marines have become involved in what he has called an all-out complete engagement. He's calling it warfare on the campus with Marine infantry on the move.
These children are going to come to America and blow your civilians up. How does that feel?
These are the pictures that the Bush administration has been waiting for.
The streets are full of people celebrating. Iraq will be disarmed of its weapons of mass destruction. The regime will end, and the Iraqi people will be free.
A day of celebration for the Bush administration, a day of celebration for millions of Iraqis, as well as Saddam Hussein's regime shows no longer any effective control of any of the normal elements of the Iraqi government. These are truly, as you pointed out, Judy, breathtaking events. Back to Judy Woodruff in Washington.
That they are, Wolf. And, you know, despite the overall sense that Saddam Hussein's regime has fallen, we know that it is still in Baghdad a very, very dangerous place to be. As we've been reporting, there are widespread reports of looting. And beyond that, many Iraqi fighters have not given up. These are some new pictures that have just come into us of that fighting you've been hearing about on the campus of Baghdad University. These pictures have just come into CNN, and here now is what CNN's Martin Savage ran into today when he was at the university campus.
As the convoy was moving, we've now run into apparently some opposition up front. There was a sound of explosions, heavy gunfire, heavy machine gun fire. We're now moving, obviously, in a different direction. The Marines apparently changing their strategy somewhat. We're not clear exactly what they're doing, but we're now in tow with the Marines. I can't tell you what road we are on because we're a little disoriented now with a change of tactics. An armored personnel carrier now also pushing up on that same position there. And we are trying to ascertain. It appears that the gunfire is coming from a collection of buildings that are off to our left. You can hear the Marines shouting. There is more fire. It's not confused. What they are doing is organizing their lines of defenses here. They were obvious. Their lines of defense are basically to protect the convoy and deploy as they move. That sounds like more tank fire or more missile fire. The tanks are still poised, you can see on that overpass. Marines are being advised to keep their eyes on both sides of the street. Just because they are engaged from one side does not mean that they cannot be engaged. That's M16 fire now starting. To be honest, this was not the exact reception we anticipated. Coming in. That was a tow, I believe, going off. There's a lot of smoke and dust now, and fire, as you can hear, and a far cry from the jubilant crowds that we left just, hard to imagine, 2 blocks away.
So the fighting doesn't get any fiercer than that, and as you just heard Martin Savage say, that was just a few blocks from where they were celebrating at the center of Baghdad. That firefight broke out on the campus of Baghdad University. Coalition forces there apparently taken by surprise and very much at it for almost an hour, if not longer. Well, raids and celebrations in other parts of Iraq today. We want to take a look now at what's going on region by region. In the town of Hillah, 60 miles south of Baghdad, the Army's 101st Airborne Division carries out a raid. CNN's Ryan Chilcote reports that it met resistance from members of the Fedayeen Saddam. Some coalition forces were given a warm welcome by civilians in the area. Now, farther south, down to Basra, where we have seen some amazing pictures of looting in recent days. Embedded reporter Richard Gaisford reports that British troops have controlled most of the looting there by now. And we move up to the north now, to Erbil, where jubilant Iraqis were described as taking to the streets to celebrate. Some of them threw confetti, they were waving flags and streamers in an impromptu parade. They were flashing the victory sign. Well, let's go live now to northern Iraq, where, as you just saw, many Kurds are also celebrating coalition victory. CNN Ben Wiedemann is there now with an update. Ben, tell us about the reaction there to what they're hearing is going on elsewhere.
Yes, Judy, it's 10:15 at night here, and normally this town is very quiet. But even now, we're still hearing honking horns and people clapping and singing as they celebrate what they believe to be the collapse of the authority of Saddam Hussein in Baghdad.
It's hard not to love a winner, especially when the guy on your side looks like he's clobbering the neighborhood bully. It didn't take long for the news from Baghdad to reach the Kurdish stronghold of Erbil and send the people here out dancing in the streets. A new face has joined Kurdistan's collection of old heroes.
Mr. Bush, because the leader of the United States like freedom for Kurdish and any war.
This part of Iraq has been free from Saddam Hussein's control since 1991. The statues and posters of the Iraqi leader torn down years ago. But still pervasive until today was the fear that Saddam Hussein would once again unleash his chemical weapons on the rebellious Kurds.
Now, another sobering thought also is that only about a half-hour's drive from here, Judy, is the Iraqi army. They're clearly down, but they're not quite out yet. Judy?
And so, as you look at what the coalition has yet to do in the north, Ben, how would you sum it up? We heard Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld saying there are a number of, I know we're maybe losing your signal, but we're going to hang in with you as long as we can, Ben. We heard the Secretary say there's still a lot of work to be done. From your perspective, what does the coalition need to do in the north?
Well, basically, they need to take all the ground that's still occupied by the Iraqi army, which is most of it outside the 3 provinces that are controlled by the Kurds. They have to take the strategic commercial hub of Mosul, the largest city in the north with a population of more than 1 million. They have to take Kirkuk, the oil-rich city, to the east of the province. All of these areas have their particular problems, ethnic problems. There are political red lines regarding the Kurdish control of Kirkuk. The Iraqi army, in fact, around Mosul, for instance, is still putting up something of a fight. Now, we're told there's still more than 100,000 Iraqi troops in the north. Now, we also know from defectors that morale in some of the parts of that force is declining, is really plummeting, but they're still out there. They're still heavily armed. We were still just yesterday being shelled by Iraqi tanks on the front line, so there's still a lot of work to be done, and really they've barely made a dent in the Iraqi forces in this part of the country. Judy?
All right, Ben Wiedemann in the north, in the city of Erbil, giving us a reality check, if you will, describing what the coalition still has to accomplish in the northern part of the country. So, Wolf, as Secretary Rumsfeld said a few minutes ago, there are still difficult and dangerous days ahead for the coalition.
That's certainly an understatement. I think it's absolutely true. Judy, thanks very much. Thanks to Ben Wiedemann as well. When we expect to get some White House reaction to what's happening in Baghdad in a live briefing, that's coming up only in a few minutes at 2:30 p.m. Eastern. Of course, we'll have live coverage here on CNN. So how are today's dramatic developments in Baghdad being played out in the Arab news media? A fascinating look at how the images there differ from what you're seeing back in the United States. Stay with us.
Donald Rumsfeld is headed to Capitol Hill to brief senators and congressmen on the latest news on the war. According to the sources I've spoken with, there are two main areas that many of the members of Congress of here want to ask Rumsfeld about. One, what is the fate of Saddam Hussein? The Senate Majority Leader Bill Frist, who had breakfast with the president this morning, said that the fate of Saddam Hussein is unclear. That mirrors with what we've heard from all levels of this government, including the reporting of Andrea Mitchell, who's been following this story very closely. Senator Frist saying that the intelligence that he's received suggests that it's more likely that they may have gotten Saddam on the first strike when this war began back on the 19th than it was on Monday's strike. So that is going to be one of the areas of discussion as they speak with the senator. The other key area is phase 2 of this war. What happens next? What happens after Saddam Hussein? How do we rebuild? How do we reconstruct Iraq? How do we win the peace? Senators particularly concerned about that. They, of course, Congress controls the purse strings and will be helping to pay for that, so they want to know how it's been done. I am hearing from many sources up here that there is growing concern that the Pentagon may be trying to anoint a leader in Ahmed Chalabi, who is the controversial leader and head of the Iraqi National Congress. He does have very strong support up here on Capitol Hill as well. But there are now members of Congress, including Senator Dick Lugar, who's the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, who told me that he does not believe that Chalabi, who has strong support over at the Pentagon, should be anointed as a leader. There is concern that it would be viewed around the Arab world as a puppet leadership. I'm also told by sources that a council meeting of leaders, including Chalabi, who was brought by the military into southern Iraq, as well as other exile leaders, other indigenous leaders in Iraq, will begin sometime next week, where they could begin the discussion of an interim authority to rule over, to govern Iraq, along with the military, the U.S. military, that will be helping out in that effort. Lester?
And Nora, the Congress already agreed to essentially pay the first installment on the bill for fighting this war. Watching over the last several weeks the amount of real estate and infrastructure that's been chopped up in this war, is there a growing sense that they're going to be hit with sticker shock when the next bill comes?
There is. Senators up here have said repeatedly that this first $80 billion is probably just the first installment to pay for the war. The large chunk of that is to pay for the military operations, but there was not a great deal of money for reconstruction, rebuilding. The administration has said largely that the Iraqis should pay for that with their oil revenue and others, but clearly there will be some more costs that are incurred, and Congress is wholeheartedly expecting that they will be asked for billions of dollars more to help pay for the rest of this war. It is not over. Even though the celebrations are going on in Baghdad, as many have said, it is not over. There will be more costs incurred. Lester?
NBC's Nora O'Donnell on Capitol.
They sounded a bit apologetic to their audiences, saying, you know, in no way do we support these celebrations, or in no way are we with or against the coalition troops moving in. We're here to report objectively and so forth. It was very interesting. I think they are in a very critical position right now. The whole world is watching to see how they're going to deal with this story, and they're being very careful on how they're reporting on it.
Octavia, let's show our viewers that picture once again. It created a stir in the Arab media earlier in the day. The soldier, it was a Marine, I believe, draping the American flag over the statue.
Jubilation. It is a very unique situation. Those people have never tasted freedom for over 35 years. Today they came on the streets, they show their real feeling, how they felt about the collapse of Saddam Hussein. Those are the people whom Saddam were saying that they are on his side, and he got their vote, and 100% vote. They all voted for him. Today we saw his lies and the myth of the regime in Iraq. I truly congratulate the Iraqi people in this victory, in this happy and jubilant day that they are expressing. It's a very overwhelming moment for, I think, every Iraqi individual that lives, whether in Iraq or outside Iraq.
You can see it on the screen. It's so true. And at the same time, this regime of fear, it seems to be evaporating. This morning, the Minister of Information, who was so responsible for putting out these incredible lies day after day after day, suddenly doesn't show up for work. And so many of the minders from the Ministry of Information who were sticking to the reporters like glue suddenly just didn't show up for work today. The border guards disappearing. It seems as if the cowardice of the regime is being laid bare so suddenly after being, I don't know, this almost comic tragedy perpetuating since 1979.
Well, last few days showed how coward and how a big liar this regime is. We heard their minister, the information minister, talking and threatening and talking about how
was easy for you to come to this part of it. There were some resistance, in fact, just a few battles between us and some four rebels, but the movement generally was easy. Did you have any problem?
All right, so that wasn't through a translation. Obviously, they were speaking English. What did that say to you, that interview of that Al Jazeera correspondent speaking to that U.S. Marine?
That was a very interesting interview, Wolf. I'm glad you picked this segment to show our viewers, because this definitely represents the, if you look at that reporter, you see a huge grin on his face, and this is the reporter that I just mentioned earlier, who was kind of apologetic at the end of this interview, telling the viewers that Al Jazeera is the first to bring you the pictures, the first pictures of the Marines moving into Baghdad, the first network to interview Marines, but then again he jumped to say this is in no way should this mean that we are with or against the coalition. We're here just to report the news objectively and fairly. But I found the grin on his face and the faces of many other Arab journalists today to be an exceptionally important point, and it just gives you an idea that they're all relieved that this is over with.
Octavia Nasser, thanks very much for that analysis. Octavia Nasser has been helping us better understand how the Arab news media is covering this war. The war is not over by any means. In much of northern Iraq, for example, the war is still very much a work in progress. The Kurds allied with the U.S.
Aggressive. Amazing they actually made it right here to the center of Baghdad. So it's dangerous. In fact, the NBC crew here is asking, are we safe yet? Can we go home? What kind of danger is there? Still a lot of danger. There's still a lot of snipers around. There's special anti-terrorist and anti-sniper forces. Well, Lester, the White House certainly feels vindicated tonight for several reasons. One, much quicker war than a lot of people gave them credit for. A brilliant campaign when you look at how it was conducted. Starting to find at least preliminary reports of some of these chemicals, weapons of mass destruction. And the terrorism. Terrorism was a big question, you'll remember, before the war as to whether they even existed here. And now we're running across them in droves, in sweeps that the U.S. Marines are carrying out through different buildings here. And I can't reiterate how sort of smart the campaign was. We were actually privileged to sit in all of the secret briefings, to watch all of the individual battalion commanders and regimental commanders put together their game plan. And as an example, the Battle of Al-Qud, which is probably one of the most decisive of the whole war. Our regiment came up from the south, engaged the Iraqis, while the 7th came in, and then disengaged and took a 24-hour drive out and around. There was a couple of feints that came in so that the military, the Marines, could go up and put 2 pontoon bridges across one of the major rivers. So it was a brilliant campaign. The Marines never had any doubt that they would win. They, of course, did suffer some tragic losses, but they executed a plan that was well thought out, where there was never any question that they would be able to beat the Iraqis. They are just sort of surprised and delighted that it ended so quickly in terms of their ability to get to the center of town. Now, quite clearly, Lester, I saw all afternoon in East Baghdad just how much work they have to do. number of intersections where I was turned back, where they said there were big gunfights. You could hear the howitzers come in. I may say howitzer again and again, but rather than close air support, when you have Marines so close to the fire, rather than take any chance with their lives, the howitzers can come in and hit basically the equivalent of the center of a 55-gallon drum from many, many kilometers away. So they've been employing that on a regular basis and very successfully.
All right, Bob, I'll ask you to stand by. We'll get back to you. We're about a minute and a half away from the White House briefing. I want to quickly go to Andrea Mitchell, NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent.